When approached with respect and reverence, the cannabis plant is meant to serve us in really beautiful, heart-opening ways. With cannabis, the veils between the physical and unseen become delicate, and the superficial layers of our identity can be stripped back. Cannabis is a conscious plant spirit, not something you just consume, but it's a spirit that you meet. She's a teacher of truths. She opens the heart to reflection. She does not seek to help you escape, but connect deeper. Welcome to Connected in the Den, a cozy little corner of the cosmos where we don't have to choose between depth and humor, the divine and human, the grounded and galactic. This is where we come home to ourselves, where remembering is radical and healing because witchy is wise and mystical is messy. So here in this den, we get to evolve together, one aligned roar at a time. I'm your host, Christiane, the Wandering Lioness, Leo Sun, heart-led healer, spiritual coach, and cosmic mirror. This is a space where we strip back the spiritual fluff, decolonize our healing, and get real about what it means to evolve, expand, and reconnect with our bodies, with our ancestors, our truth, and each other, whether we're talking extraterrestrial magic, sacred rage, psychic gifts, or the soft power of stillness. All are welcome here, seen here, connected here. Get comfy. This is where we gather, remember, and rise. Connected in the Den. Okay, so look, we cannot be classy all of the time. It's exhausting. In this episode of Connected in the Den, we do have some adult language. So if you have little ones around, you might want to grab your headphones. This episode about cannabis is meant for educational and informational purposes only. I am not a medical doctor or a licensed healthcare professional, so I cannot diagnose, prescribe, or give personalized medical advice. If you are considering using cannabis for any reason, especially for health or spiritual purposes, please talk to a qualified medical professional who knows your history. Do your research, seek out experts, and ethically trained practitioners, and always listen to your body. Your safety and well-being always comes first. Hey, friends. You all know this space is for the curious, the cosmic, and the consciously chill. For those of you who don't know me, hey, I'm the host of Connected in the Den. I'm Christiane. I'm a psychic medium, energy healer, and a spiritual coach, teacher, guide. I'm a witchy weirdo. Today, we're getting into something sacred, a little controversial, healing, and something I think is deeply misunderstood. Thanks, colonization. We're talking about cannabis, not just the plant, but the spirit of the plant. I'd like to slow things down and, open the mind and explore the spiritual and ancestral relationship that humans have had with this medicine for thousands of years. This isn't just about rolling a joint and sparking up, although if you're in the mood and that's your thing, please feel free while you join me. This is about reconnecting with wisdom, with nature, with the self, and hopefully unlearning some of the colonized fear and stigma that's been placed on this plant and the relationship we can have with her. So if you're listening while walking, painting, laying in bed, just vibing, take a breath. Feel free to spark one up or brew your favorite tea, wink, wink, and open your heart with me. This is a sacred conversation. So first, let me speak on my personal relationship with our dear cannabis. I've been sober from alcohol and chemical drugs for almost 5 years now. It'll be 5 years this July, 2025. Now, that was a personal journey for me on my spiritual and wellness path. That was guidance that I received from my ancestors to stop drinking, removing everything else, cigarettes, recreational drugs. That all naturally just followed. Alcohol has definitely been a harmful tool, I would say, in my family lineage. For those currently in the physical and in the unseen, I think some of us are wise and open to that truth. Some of us perhaps in denial. For me, I couldn't deny it. I had a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I got to a point where I was consuming it daily. And when it comes to spirit work, the known seers in my family also had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, from what I've been told. Now, I believe that that was because of self-medicating from trauma. I also believe it had to do with like dumbing down the senses to shut off connection to spirit. I've been told my ancestors were very naturally strong in their connection to spirit as seers and as healers. And I don't believe they had the knowledge and tools to know how to turn their dials to spirit down. Do you know what I mean? Or how to cleanse their own spirits after spirit work. And I believe that they used alcohol as a tool to do that. And I truly, truly feel that they guided me to stop drinking so that I wouldn't repeat the same harmful patterns and habits. And I wanted to include this part of the conversation in this episode because as a mentor, as a spiritual mentor, I'm often asked if I drink, if I use drugs, if I smoke herb. So I don't drink. I don't use drugs, but I do work with plants, mainly psilocybin and cannabis. But today's conversation is about our beloved cannabis. So I was introduced to the plant as a teen. I really only consumed her in recreational ways. Now, in my adult years, almost middle age. Still got some time, but I'm in my latest years of my latest year of my 30s. At times I still, I'll overindulge, let's say like at a concert or festival, but I primarily work with cannabis in medicinal ways. I work with her for restful sleep, for creative insights and exploration to connect with spirit and channel spirit energies. I work with her to support my inner reflection for my own emotional processing. And my favorite spot to work with her is outside where I can be all up in her to the max. Plants are medicine. I think that most of us tuning in, believe this to be true, and we often hear this. I feel that medicine is not just in the definition of healing or supporting our healing, but also in terms of medicine as in teaching and guidance. As I mentioned, cannabis isn't just consumed, she's met, right? She's respected in many traditions, prayed with. She's a conscious plant spirit. She's subtle, she's gentle, but mega powerful. She's not here to help us escape. She is here to help us connect, to bring us deeper into our bodies, into our intuition, into our memories, into our truth. She's here to help connect us deeper with the earth and with the cosmos. And like any true teacher, she's going to show you what you're ready to see, not always what you're comfortable with. And yeah, I say she because across time, across cultures, cannabis has often been seen as carrying a feminine energy, nurturing, creative, reflective, protective, and powerful. Okay. So cannabis did not just start with dispensaries long before the war on drugs, before prohibition, before corporate branding and neon edibles, before colonialism and patriarchy, cannabis was used sacredly and intentionally by ancient cultures around the freaking world. So let's take a moment to honor some of those timelines. In ancient India, and please excuse my pronunciation. Hopefully I don't butcher these titles. And so in ancient India, cannabis is described in the Atharva Veda, one of the 4 sacred Hindu texts, as a plant of joy and liberation. Lord Shiva, the deity of transformation and destruction, is said to have not only consumed, but is the cannabis plant. It's said that he would consume bhang. It's a cannabis-infused, THC, cannabis-infused drink, which is used to activate connection to higher consciousness. From what I know, it's made from grinding cannabis leaves. It can be mixed with spices and other herbs. I think sometimes milk. I could be wrong. So don't, please do some research. I do have links in the show notes for resources. If you are like me and you like to nerd out and do more research, okay, there's some links that are going to be in the show notes that'll be available on my Substack, Patreon, and Instagram as well. I know that it's consumed during like festivals and ceremony to purify the mind and body, used in meditation for spiritual connection. I also know that they also use cannabis resin, also in Indian cultures. In Africa, cannabis is known as daga and has been used again for centuries by Zulu, Bantu, other tribes to facilitate spiritual connection. Used to like enter into like trance states, right? In dances and healing ceremonies, all with the intention of connecting with the ancestors. From my research, I also learned that the Zulus would ingest cannabis through steam baths and enemas and also smoke it before battle. And then in ancient China, cannabis was used in Taoist rituals for spiritual visions and communication with spirits. The earliest recorded documentation of cannabis use is by the Emperor Chen Yang, where he put together recorded results of his medicinal experiments. And this was into pharmacopoeia. So he put this together way back in 2737 BCE. He's often called the father of Chinese medicine, and he used cannabis to treat many illnesses and ailments, including malaria, gout, rheumatism. So cannabis wasn't just seen as a remedy. It's part of a much bigger relationship with nature and balance and our body's own energy systems, right? And then in many indigenous cultures of Turtle Island, of the Americas, plant medicine, including cannabis, has been part of ceremony, connection to the land, and spiritual storytelling. Not all nations and tribes used cannabis. It's not universal, but when it's present, it is treated with respect. Also, a lot of evidence of the use of cannabis in ancient Egypt. Cannabis was, again, used medicinally and ritually. The goddess Seshat, she's the goddess of writing, architect, sacred knowledge, like the ruler of books. Her name literally means female scribe, and she's often seen wearing like a leopard skin draped over her, like over her robe, and with a headdress with a 7-pointed leaf, and there's like a crescent, like kind of above that leaf. Some believe, me, believe that it resembles a cannabis leaf. Obviously, not all scholars agree, but it is a powerful symbol. And intuitively, when I connect what she governs, and just what the images look like. To me, it definitely looks like a cannabis leaf. She governed measurement, memory, mystical insight. She was like the celestial librarian, a friend of the dead in the afterlife. And then the measuring cords also for me, why it just makes sense that it is a cannabis leaf, because the cords that she's often showed holding or using were made of hemp fibers, and hemp was loved because of its like insane strength. It's super durable. It was perfect for like ropes and cords that were used in building, in architecture, and like what's it called? Surveying, land surveying, in ancient Egypt, right? Hemp is like cannabis's practical, down to earth sibling. Like long before colonization, hemp was like an essential part of everyday life in a lot of ancient cultures. Grown, like I said, because it's super strong, super durable, but also the seeds are rich in protein. So it was used to make clothing, rope, nets, sails, paper, building materials. I'm talking like ancient China, Egypt, Mesopotamia. All had uses for hemp. It's basically it's like the duct tape of the ancient world. So it's a plant of sustenance and survival. It clothed people, it fed them, helped them build their homes, and made their boats float, and their, agriculture could thrive. And cannabis, like through hemp, was introduced to American society in this early 1600s in the form of hemp. And George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were two of the biggest investors, not only in the hemp industry, but also in slavery. So after the Civil War ended, and slavery was abolished, hemp farming in the U.S. obviously started to drop off, because the entire system that it depended on enslaved people, enslaved labor, was no longer a thing. So cannabis then started to get recognized in America for its healing properties. It was showing up in tinctures and tonics at pharmacies, all the things that our ancestors did use it for. But then this led into the colonization of the plant, which I'll get into in a sec. So like as we're breaking down here, cannabis as a plant family has many beautiful layers, right? There is this beautiful spiritual ceremonial side, and then there's also an earthy practical side. I need to mention Rastafarianism. This is deeply rooted an Afro-Indigenous spiritual movement, which was birthed in Jamaica in the 1930s. Rastafari is not just a religion, it's a way of life. It's cultural. And it's basically like a spiritual reclamation born out of resistance, right, to colonialism, white supremacy, the erasure of African identity. It grew during the wake of slavery and oppression and the need for connection, right? And cannabis, or ganja, holds a really important place in this culture, in this path and community. Rastafarians don't just use ganja, they honor it. It's not just recreational, it's ritual. It's seen as a holy herb. It cleanses the body, it opens the mind, it creates space for deeper meditation, inner reflection, communion with Jah, or God. It's used in spiritual gatherings. People come together and reflect and pray. So to Rastas, ganja is not about escape. It's about alignment. It's an herb that helps slow down the mind so that you can commune with the ancestors. It's a plant for peace and connection to truth. Now, Rastafari, they've been hugely stereotyped and misrepresented, also thanks to colonialism, which goes kind of hand in hand with the colonization of cannabis. And cannabis was introduced to Jamaica through Indian enslaved people during British colonization in the 1800s. And Rastafarians drew from Indian traditions, right, which blended those traditions into Afrocentric spiritual cosmology. So when we talk about the spiritual use of cannabis, we have to name and respect the role of Rastafarianism and how they've played a role in preserving that sacred relationship with spirituality and cannabis, especially, in the face of systemic persecution, oppression, racism. Rastas have historically been criminalized and harassed for using ganja. So honoring ganja in a spiritual way also means honoring the people and the lineages who have kept that relationship alive. So along the way, colonizers got their greedy, grubby, pasty little hands involved and criminalized cannabis to disconnect us from this wisdom, especially targeting Black, Brown, Indigenous, racialized communities who held these plants and practices in their bloodlines. Colonialism told us cannabis was dangerous. And this shit spreads deep into today, into modern present day society. This isn't misinformation. It was a calculated move. I was going to say calculized. Calculated move, right? Western forces weaponized fear and propaganda to justify the criminalization of a sacred plant and then criminalize the people who held generational relationships with it. Yeah, regulations and restrictions on the sale of cannabis as a drug began as early as like the 1900s. So after the Mexican Revolution, Mexicans sought safety and work in colonized America, right? Mexicans also consumed cannabis, which they called marijuana. So now here's where it gets layered, because the plant itself wasn't new to the U.S., right? Cannabis and hemp were already being used, but when it came in through Mexican communities, suddenly it had a different name, and so it started getting a different attention. So this is where the fear-mongering began. Politicians and the media started using the word marijuana very intentionally to racialize the plant and basically stir up and push an anti-Mexican narrative. So it wasn't about just the plant itself. It was about who was using it. And we see this shit still today, right? Cannabis didn't become controversial overnight. It became a tool for social control, especially against Mexican and Black communities, deeply colonial, deeply racist. In Canada, cannabis was added to the banned substances list in 1923. This blew my mind when I learned this. And this happened without debate, without explanation. Like, there wasn't even a recorded public debate. There wasn't even a major public health concern about it in Canada. Just a quiet, racist policy. Obviously, they were influenced by the American rhetoric around cannabis and like brainwashing the public into believing it was dangerous and immoral, right? I also learned in researching for this episode, because I wanted to dig deep. So I wanted to share with y'all like deep things I wish we learned in school. And obviously they wouldn't teach about cannabis in school, which is crazy, but also makes sense because of colonization. But there was this real gem of a woman, Emily Murphy. She was a real treat. She was a Canadian white supremacist and an anti-drug crusader. And she really helped kind of fan the flames. You know what I mean? She had a book in 1922. It was called The Black Candle, and it included tons of racist claims about cannabis, connected it with violence and quote-unquote racial mixing. And it really influenced Canadian lawmakers. And then eventually in the U.S., cannabis was banned in 1937, and this was with the passing of the Marijuana Tax Act, which again was mostly primarily about racial control. You know, cannabis was connected to black jazz and blues musicians and Mexican migrant workers. So it ultimately just became a tool of surveillance and punishment, right? And they didn't ban cannabis outright, but they did make it hella difficult and super risky to grow, to possess, to sell without a special federal stamp. So for all practical purposes, weed became illegal, which is wild. And the Marijuana Tax Act was in effect until 1969. Obviously, by then, the damage was done, right? And then cannabis was fully criminalized under the Controlled Substances Act, of 1970. And then it was labeled a Schedule 1 drug. And this is crazy. If any of you didn't know this, a Schedule 1 drug, according to the U.S. Controlled Substances Act, is a category of controlled substances with the highest potential for abuse, which is crazy. So cannabis was supposedly labeled as dangerous as heroin. Yeah. Is that not nuts? And then in the same breath, you know, indigenous plant medicine practices were already under attack through residential schools, forced assimilation, the banning of their traditional ceremonies, the spiritual use of plants, including cannabis, was labeled savage and dangerous by colonial law. And then fast forward to now, like I said, these very same governments and corporations that spent decades demonizing the plant and still do, they're now profiting from it. Even though they policed marginalized communities, weaponized, like profiting from it. Cannabis has become a billion-dollar industry. Now they've just made it sparkly cool and sanitized, censored. You know, like you can buy it in cool boutiques. And don't get me wrong, some of these dispensaries are mad cool, like real, you know, vibey. Some a little more some look like freaking Apple stores, man. You know, and there's like, I don't know, like there's a name for them. Shit, man. There's a name for them. For the people who help us when you go to buy. And they've, you know, got cool trendy music on, but so it's slowly has been becoming, I guess, more normalized, but the system's still broken. There are thousands of people, Black, Indigenous, Latin people who are still sitting in prison for cannabis related charges. And now in many places, white owned companies are making generational wealth. Hello, off that same plant with no restitution, no reparations, not even acknowledgement to who held the medicine first. So I had to go there. I had a little history lesson with Christiane. I'm going to get into the spiritual connections on a deeper level in a minute. But I mean, if we're going to talk about cannabis for spiritual connection, I cannot ignore the need for justice and decolonization, right? Because what spiritual reclamation really means, to reclaim cannabis as a spiritual ally, is to fully honor the whole story, not just the parts that feel good. We have to hold space for both the plant's beauty and the violence that's been done to her in her name. So, my friends, I encourage you to please uplift the voices of Black, Brown, Indigenous herbalists, growers, educators. Listen to and support people whose ancestors have always known how to work with this plant. Learn from those who, you know, bring cultural and land-based knowledge and spiritual knowledge, not just lab reports and luxury branding, right? Support cannabis justice reform and the decriminalization efforts. There are some fabulous organizations. The Last Prisoner Project, Cannabis Amnesty in Canada, and many others that are working to wipe out records and free prisoners and create equity in the industry. So please follow them, donate if you can, share their work, support their efforts. Also buy consciously, support small scale ethical growers, especially those who are Indigenous, Black, queer, or from communities that are the most harmed by the war on drugs. Buy organic. I actually have a trip into Toronto planned with a list of Black-owned dispensaries that I'd like to visit. So don't just shop for the trendiest strains. Support the people who carry the plant with purpose. You know, understand that working with cannabis today is a doorway. It's a portal and an invitation to walk more consciously, more humbly, more responsibly. Those who are actively working to decolonize their minds, perhaps you or someone you know carries harmful beliefs about the cannabis plant family. I invite you to reflect, like, who taught you the plant was bad? Was it your caregivers? Was it the media? Politicians? Who suffered for you to have access to it today? And then what's the role, your responsibility in repairing that harm? Because it is our responsibility, I feel, to hold space, you know, for both reverence and responsibility, right? So that being said, let's talk about what the cannabis connection actually means for us, you know, us spiritual seekers, us intuitive folk, energy sensitive beings, witches, healers, aliens, trying to make sense of the human experience, right? Cannabis, when used with intention, you know, I say intention is everything. Cannabis carries a very deep grounding energy. When we move away from the recreational perspective of cannabis, right? It comes from the earth and it connects us back to it. So in healing practices, in rituals, it primarily connects us with the root and sacral chakras, Muladhara and Svadhisthana. This helps to help us feel safe and grounded, embodied, and connected to our being and to the earth, right? With intentional use, cannabis can also soften our emotional defenses. It can help ease anxiety and create a really soft, sweet space for self-reflection, self-love, for forgiveness and compassion, activating the heart chakra, anahata. Some strains, especially the more active sativa dominant strains, or hybrids, you might find this in hybrids, I find this in hybrids myself, are known for stimulating our visionary states. Our gifts of second sight activates our creativity and our intuition. So this opens up our third eye and our crown and our solar. Agnya, Sahasrara, and Manipura. So this supports us in accessing higher realms of consciousness, into dream states, and into spiritual insight. The canna plant, like, it literally helps enter us into those dreamy meditative brainwave states, specifically the theta range. And this is the state that actually does, scientifically proven, it does activate intuition and connection to the spirit realms. Like, it activates our inner vision when when our brain is in this particular state in theta. So she really does help to align the chakras, to align our energetic field. Like I said, she's a spirit. She will help you soften your grip and explore what you've buried. She'll help open your mind and help enter into meditative states a little more easier, help activate the throat chakra, Vishuddha, to access, inner listening and receive divine messages. Again, not to escape, but to expand our perception. Expand our perception as in like, oh my gosh, I never noticed this freaking leaf can shimmer like this in the light before. I've never noticed it could do that. I've never noticed how insanely beautiful the color of the flowers are around me. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, it just, in such beautiful ways, just to completely expands your perception. I feel like it really helps me sometimes even to activate and connect with the spirits of nature, the spirits in the forests, or the intelligence of water if you're sitting by a lake or a river or something. She really does help to deepen our connection to ourselves, to spirit, and to the subtle energies of the universe, the earth, the cosmos. And again, intention matters, environment matters, your mental health, the dosage, the strain, your emotional state, all of this matters. It's a real, there's a formulation to it for everyone that's very unique. And so I want to pause for a sec and just offer some loving but clear caution here. Cannabis is not for everyone. It does interact with our own neurobiology in different ways. It interacts with our trauma history, our medications, our spiritual boundaries. So if you're considering working with cannabis more intentionally and spiritually, if at all, please speak with a medical professional, especially if you live with generalized anxiety disorder or bipolar or schizophrenia, or if you're on any medication. Consult with trained herbalists, cannabis educators, or ceremonial facilitators. If you're working with facilitators, preferably those who are rooted in cultural lineages that have worked with this medicine. Start low, go slow. Know your strains, indica versus sativa versus hybrid. There's also the terpene profile and the cannabinoid balance. There's a lot. There's a lot. And again, avoid using cannabis as an escape from emotional pain. Use it as a mirror, not a mask. She's a sacred plant. She's not a shortcut, right? Also, the frequency of cannabis, I feel, shifts depending on how it's grown, how it's processed, how it's consumed. Modern day, right? It's handled by a lot of people. It's transported by a lot of people, packaged, sold, a lot of hands. I always set intention and clear, kind of realign the energy of the plant after I've purchased it. Intentionally grown plants with prayer and song and ritual, the environment. Also, I try to stick to organically grown, tend to carry a clearer and more, I feel like a more balanced, harmonious kind of vibration versus when it's not organic or not intentionally grown. And, when we're using it recreationally, it can dull the energetic field. It can pull someone downward rather than upward, right? When it's consumed ceremonial, with intention, when it's guided by presence and reverence, it aligns the plant with higher vibrational states. So if you've ever felt that cannabis does in fact feel different when you do approach it with respect, with intention, you are not imagining it. There is a really powerful shift when you approach it with intention. It's a softness. It's a spaciousness. It really, it helps the inner gaze. I don't know, connect a little more inward, expand outward. It's real. It's so real, man. When that happens, and when you treat it like a plant, like a sacred plant and not a product, like a presence, like a spirit, like a teacher, you will feel and connect with the shift. And you'll have these really beautiful experiences with it because the frequency of this plant is living. It is intelligent. and it is relational. And she responds how you show up. So she can meet you in prayer. She can meet you in art. She can meet you in grief. She can meet you in joy. She can meet you in connection to spirit. She's not a one-size-fits-all teacher. Cannabis is definitely not here to be commodified and dominated or disrespected. She's a mirror. She's a guide. She's an invitation. She wants us to slow down. She wants us to feel more, to listen deeper, to reconnect with yourself, with the land, with spirit, and with the truth of what's been forgotten. So, make sure to meet her intentionally. And I am so happy that, more countries, more politicians, shifting the narrative, legalizing the use of it. It is really powerful to see. Hopefully more countries will catch on. But I do still feel like it's being used as a weapon. So hopefully, having conversations like this can help lift the stigma and help other people further decolonize their mind and their view and perspective with the plant. Check in with your body, check in with your ancestry, check in with your needs, do your research, talk to your doctor, learn from wise, grounded, culturally rooted sources. Take your time. If using cannabis, especially on our spiritual path, there's no need. We know there's no need to rush the spiritual path, and there's absolutely no shame if cannabis isn't right for you. Not everyone will feel called to work with her. Not everyone should, right? That's okay. If you do feel the call, let it be sacred. Let it be yours, uniquely yours. Because when you stop trying to use cannabis, when you work with her intentionally, well, you might finally hear and feel what she's been trying to teach you all along. Thank you so much for curling up in the den with me today. Your energy, your presence, and your curiosity truly mean the world. If something in this episode stirred something in you, made you think, made you laugh, made you feel a little more connected, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Share this podcast with a fellow wild heart, a cosmic kin, or someone who's just walking their own path of remembering. That's how we keep growing this pride, one beautiful freaking sacred soul at a time. This space is a labor of love, and your support helps it reach the people who need it most. My darling, this lioness is always rooting for your roar. Until next time, be curious, be inspired, and be blessed. See you soon on Connected in the Den.